to make CEWs a part of every police officer's standardized piece of equipment and kit. The plan in 2021 going forward is to have CEWs for the 30-plus sworn officer new hires that join OPS and going forward.
So, Mr. Chair, that concludes the presentation, and open to any questions that the board may have.
So, thank you very much, folks. Before we open any discussion, we have to add this item to our agenda. As the Director General said earlier, that report was not available earlier because staff were negotiating to the last minute. So I need to accept this as an item in the agenda. So moved by the Vice Chair, this item be included. All in favor? Okay, thank you very much, folks. So now, before we turn it to my board member for question, we have a member of the public. So the member of the public can sit on this side, and Deborah can stay where you are, so they can sit on my left. And we have Heather Stash. I hope I said her name right. So when you're coming down this way, you only have 5 minutes to speak to the board. So please take the seat. Jill, go ahead.
That's right. Good to go.
Perfect. Sorry.
That's okay.
Hello. Some of you know me from past appearances at various other committee meetings. Our council, many of you do not. I will say, first of all, that my late husband, who has been gone 14 years in June, was a police officer for the state of Washington for 13 years. So I am not anti-police in any way, shape, or form. I am, however, terrified by this plan because I am one of those Ottawans that live every single day, every single hour with multiple disabilities. I have less than 50% of my hearing, and I have osteoporosis and osteoarthritis in both hips. So my walker is over there. I use it every single step that I take out of my home. Now, what I'm concerned about is two things. First of all, it says use of CEWs on vulnerable populations, and then it goes on to talk about people with mental health issues. It says nothing about people who can't hear. It is absolutely possible, more than possible, that I'm walking down the street or in a crowd of people, and an officer tries to call behind me, and because of the ambient noise, and because of my broken ears, I don't hear them. And then that officer decides I'm not paying attention to them, not following what they're asking, because I can't hear what they're asking. And so we deploy what's called a non-lethal method of trying to get my attention. 50,000 volts this far from my brain. Now, that is not going to be non-lethal. None of you would want 50,000 volts or how many thousands of volts through your brain. The other problem is it is designed to have the person it's used against to make them lose muscle control. If I fall, which I will if I'm shot by a taser, I will break both my hips. Breaking your hip is correlated to death. That's the facts. Now, I will tell you the scariest situation I've ever been in. I went to a conference in Rhode Island. To get there, I took Amtrak. I told them I needed somebody to meet me to help me with my luggage. They didn't. So, very long story short, I was confronted by two NYPD officers who kept yelling at me on the top of their lungs, "Stop yelling! Stop yelling! Stop yelling!" and interrupting me every 2 seconds. So I finally realized I'm going to be arrested for my disabilities. And I thought, what can I do? And I took out one of my and I put it in my hand.
Okay, I'm going to ask you, Heather, I'm going to ask you to wrap up, please.
Every time I am in the U.S., if it's in a group situation like the march that just happened in March, I wear a T-shirt. I am deaf.
Okay.
Because I cannot afford for it to even happen once.
Okay, I'm going to ask you to wrap up, please. Thank you very much for bringing this. Oh, okay, go ahead.
Sorry.
Thank you, because you're 5 minutes up. I heard you loud and clear, and I think our staff are taking notes of your presentation. And if you, hold on. If you need to speak offline with the superintendent, Sterling Harley, it's fine. If it's not, it's okay. We heard you loud and clear. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. What they keep telling me, and I've been told this by police officers from Vancouver to Ottawa, is it won't happen. It's unlikely to happen. Okay. I can't put my life on the line like that. It cannot happen.
We heard you, Heather. Thank you very much. Thank you for your presentation. Now I'll turn it to our colleague for question. Start with Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you very much. I'm very pleased with the report. I was one of the big skeptics several years ago when this first rolled out, and my concern was that this was just going to be a layered on and there would be no de-escalation anywhere else. And I'm really pleased with the report. You've made it really clear that you're about de-escalation. I think it's an excellent report. It's very thorough. And I'm a believer now. I certainly wasn't before, but one thing that I really was impressed with, and I realize it must be a small sample size, but a decrease in the usage of other types of force, including almost 40% decrease in the discharge of firearms and a 29% decrease in the drawing of handguns. I'm really impressed with that, and I'm really impressed with the to which you're looking at de-escalation. And one of your comments that I would just ask a little bit more on is you mentioned about the OPS being a leader in de-escalation training. And what I'm wondering is, for the board's sake, is there some metrics that you can show us how you're a leader by comparison with other services, and something so we can measure that improvement in terms of de-escalation? Thank you.
Mr. Chair, as Superintendent Ford mentioned, the province right now is conducting academic research and coming up with a new framework with respect to use of force, which has a focus on de-escalation. They've done a number of part of the work is what's going on right now in Ontario and what is going on across the globe with respect to leading practices around use of force. That will be part of the entire report that the province is putting together, and we are part of that working group. So we will access that type of information through the provincial report that's coming out later this year.
Any other question? So what's in front of us? Did I miss it? No. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. So 1, amendment to the board's use of force policy AL-012 to replace the language in section 3 as follows. The chief of police will be authorized to issue a conducted energy weapon CEW to all sworn police officers. 2, the purchase of 400 CEWs from MD Shelton Company Limited for $1,177.77 exclusive of taxes for phase 1 and expansion plan 3, that the purchase be funded from the operating budget, $640,000, and the remainder from the fleet reserve fund at $537,776. So that's going to be replacing. You have a copy of that motion from you? Okay. Any question about okay, on the motion? Okay, thank you very much, folks. And with that, we'll turn to
Mr. Chair, I just want to acknowledge the work that was put in the past number of years in leading up to today, and I don't think you understand the significance of this public policy decision for the police service. This means a lot to our frontline officers, means a lot to the community from a safety perspective, and this is, I think, a clear example of the board's understanding of the very, very difficult work that the women and men of the Ottawa Police Service have out there, and allowing them to access and have access to the tool is critical. So thank you very much for that support.
Thank you, Chief, and thank you, Deborah, Mark, and Stu. And Sergeant, thank you, because you didn't have to do any demo tonight, but we'll wait till the 15th. With that, we have item 11, and that's the service initiative closeout report. And with that, we have a presentation. Chief, maybe you want to introduce the team when they're settled?
Yes, Mr. Chair, it's actually quite fitting that this is Chief Skinner's final board meeting. Deputy Chief Skinner has been the lead, executive lead on this program, and a number of our team are here today. I just want to stand up. I recognize the team that for the past couple of years have been working very hard on the service initiative. So you stand up there, so you just be recognized. So thank you very much. And part of that team, Jane Wright, was our program director. So great to see you, Jane, here tonight, and thank you for all the assistance that you've done. So we committed to coming back to the board to report on what we wanted to accomplish with SI, what we've accomplished so far, and then the other legacy pieces that have yet to be achieved through the work. So you can sit down now. So thank you. So with that, I'll turn it over to Deputy Chief Skinner and Michelle Gauthier.
Thank you very much, Chief. And once again, I sit here, but this is the work of many, many people. We have a team that consists of about a dozen people, but there were more than 200 members of our organization who have provided input from the outset of the project all the way through to the end, and they continue to make recommendations for continuous improvement to the structures that we've put in place. So as many of you are aware, our service, not unlike other police services, are challenged to deliver policing services in a city of growing population, changing demographics, increased crime, constrained budgets, all without compromising officer safety. At the direction of the board, the SI program was officially launched in 2014 to enhance and strengthen service to the public by assessing and aligning our focus on core policing responsibilities, identifying opportunities for efficiencies, and a more sustainable policing model through restructuring and implementing changes to how we deliver our service. Over the course of several years, OPS has provided updates to the PA, the largest transformation project since the 1995 city amalgamation. Today's presentation marks the final report of the service initiative to the board and will provide an overview of what was accomplished with the SI program. The service focused its efforts in 2014 by developing a target operating model, TOM, essentially developing a future vision of the service. The TOM provided the foundation of how the business should transform in all aspects, from how we envision day-to-day operations to how we manage the business side of the service. The TOM was created by the senior management of the organization and was presented to the PSB in 2014. Various directorates have been working towards realizing various aspects within the TOM, and this includes the Service Initiative Program. Having seen this diagram numerous times, I can tell you that initially it was very confusing. I'm going to try and take you through it one more time, and I think when we really break it down, you're going to see that it really does become much more simplified. This TOM visual was presented to the board and essentially became the roadmap for the SI program. At a high level, the TOM is divided into 4 quadrants with a center hub. The top left, which is the control quadrant, focuses on how we manage the various demands and priorities within the service. The bottom left is the resolve quadrant. This is how we resolve issues by improving communication channels, leveraging technology, and strengthening our key structures. For example, organizational design and our geographic deployment structure. Then we have the top right, which is the impact quadrant. This focuses on services and strategies to strengthen community engagement and partnerships, improving services to victims, identifying proactive activities that will have a positive impact on crime and social disorder. And then the bottom right, which is the manage quadrant. This identifies opportunities within the business side of the service, developing and implementing business strategies that will promote efficiencies, improve performance management, and risk management. And then the center hub, which is the control center. A central hub that uses real-time data to assist and drive both operational and strategic decision-making. It is fundamental to understand and appreciate the TOM as it drove the many projects within the Service Initiative Program. Before we demonstrate the program's achievements related to the TOM, it's important to illustrate the evolution of the SI program. Excuse me. Between 2011 to 2013, the service embarked on a review and opportunity assessment for the service. The ideation phase was critical to understand the current state of the service and the opportunity potential prior to initiating a program. This is actually when we started with the opportunity log, which our members provided over 300 opportunities where they saw an opportunity for efficiencies. 2014 focused on building the foundational components to support a multi-year program. The key deliverables included the development of the TOM, the rationalization of the opportunity log, identifying and setting program resources, the development of the various project charters, the establishment of a governance model, and the identification of an executive sponsor, which was myself. The majority of the project work spanned over 3 years, 2015 to 2017. During this 3-year phase, the SI team, along with numerous working groups, initiated and executed many aspects of the 9 projects. To highlight key activities in 2015, the teams developed business cases to support demand opportunities, developed and analyzed options for various organizational structures, created an integrated operating model, and formed the consultation engagement framework. In 2016, project work focused on detailed design and included various implementation activities: court service delivery model, the OPSOC control center, victim crisis unit service delivery model, and the investigation organizational restructuring, and the implementation of various online reporting. 2017 saw many aspects being implemented, such as the new frontline directorate structure, new sectors, approval of the community safety service strategy, seeing the launch of 2 community networks, the demand for service system, enhanced IVR telephone system, coordinated service delivery changes, and the development and approval of an integrated community policing strategy. And finally, 2018 marked the official closeout of the program with the continuation of major activities under the authority of the actual functional units. These initiatives include the Alternative Response Unit, the Health IM and Guarding Mental Health Patients Project, the civilianization of the desk, and the OPSTAT process. The OPSTAT stands for the Operational Performance Strategies and Tactics, and that's basically a meeting of the superintendents to determine where we need to be putting our resources, evidence, and data. So from the program's goals perspective, all of the work and investments over the past several years served to deliver on these 4 program goals, which were to improve the level of service to citizens of the City of Ottawa, enhance and strengthen community and agency partnerships, realize money and/or person-hour efficiencies, and capitalize on cost recovery opportunities. The 6 delivery projects, service delivery, demand management, control center, frontline deployment, investigations project, organizational design, operational performance management framework, and the integrated community policing strategy and framework have all contributed to achieving these goals. The combined effort, commitment, dedication, and drive by many sworn of all ranks and civilian members, the SI project team and executive led to the following accomplishments in relation to the TOM. So we're going to do this by quadrant. So the first, of course, is the center, which is the center of the target operating model, which is our control center, and we now call the OPSOC. So we approved a 3-phase control center strategy. We implemented the control center phase 1, now known as the OPSOC, and placed directive, proactive patrol sergeants within that OPSOC. The left top corner, the left side of the TOM, in moving to the left side, we concentrate on the demand strategy. In order to build capacity for our members, we needed to look at how we delivered our services. Creating capacity allows for our members to focus on core policing activities. By leveraging technology, enhancing our citizen self-serve options, streamlining processes, the service aims to reduce 25 to 40% our demands for service through a variety of strategies, which include posted up there. To provide you with some context in how capacity was achieved, I'd just like to highlight the development of the COMDAT tool. The COMDAT is a decision assist tool used by our communication center dispatcher to aid in determining the need to dispatch an officer to a call. By utilizing this tool and alternative response methods, it is expected that the service can redirect 41% of all P4 calls of the service. It also provides evidence when the call is redirected and somebody asks the question, why did you do this? We can have a consistent answer to the member of the public who has concerns. We also are now providing support to our members who are making these decisions. In the past, they may have been making on a gut feeling or based on their own experience. This now gives them evidence to support their decision making. Continuing with the left side, the service partners with multi-agency groups to enhance service, realizing efficiencies by launching a merit pilot in partnership with community members and agencies, approving a community safety services strategy, which included the introduction of formalized community networks in 2 different neighborhoods, completing a victim crisis unit case review, and leveraging partnerships with the Ottawa Victim Services to handle non-clinical responses for certain cases. This really put the right people doing the right type of work when it came to our victims' services. And we further developed and formalized an emergency access authorization initiative, which will come into play by July 1st of this year, which basically allows officers access to multi-dwellings for after-hours emergency calls. And we're also in progress with Guarding Mental Health Patients initiative, working very closely with our hospitals here in the city and overlay some technology that we have through a grant that we've received. Improve and enhance our services, the service focused on improving its operational communication channels, leverage technology and streamlining existing processes. Some examples of what was completed included the establishment plans for service system and process to identify, assign, execute, and report on proactive and reactive demands. I think this is one of those areas where it really shows that we now have evidence for what our officers are doing when they're not at calls for service. 300,000 calls for service, we can really give you good data on what that they're doing during those times. This demand for service now allows us to track that activity as well and to prioritize the work that we're doing in the community on a proactive basis and a reactive basis. For instance, marches and parades, those types of things. Streamlining investigative case management processes by adding a case manager in fraud, sexual assault and child abuse, and partner assault. Enhancing case flow and assignment processes in traffic and youth. And closing low complexity property crimes at source via the call center. Introducing additional options for case managers with involvement of the ARU, which we're just about to stand up. and shifting low-level investigations to patrol, which is also in progress. And I think you'll see that by doing some of these things, we're actually providing that expertise and experience for frontline members so they're in a better position when they come to a time where they want to move from patrol into one of the more specialized areas. We're also providing investigative support and oversight through case managers for the front line, so they have somebody to go to that has some expertise in investigations. A large component of the change resulted in how we were structured. The organizational changes focus on reducing duplication, places where they were needed most. For example, the need to focus on core policing activities, enhancing service to the City of Ottawa. The organizational changes that were implemented included a new frontline deployment model and a shift towards sectors as opposed to the smaller zones. We also had a new CID organization and alignment. Key service strategies implemented included the launch of the formalized community networks in Lower Town and in Overbrook, and those continue to develop. And we're looking at a third FCN coming, we hope soon, in the Caldwell area. And then the completion of the merit pilot, which we transition now over to operations, and we've received operational funding provided by the Public Safety Canada Resilience Fund. The first 2 years of the SI program primarily focus on the left side of the TOM. In 2017, the program shifted direction toward the right side, pushing key community-centric strategies. This included designing and approving an integrated OPS community policing strategy and framework, as well as establishing a proactive OPSAT process to strategize, prioritize, and execute trending crime and social disorder issues. And I'm going to give you a short example. For instance, we saw a significant increase in frauds. So by bringing that information to the table, we were able to ask those questions to really delve into what does that mean? How can we prevent this? What we were able to see was those frauds were actually created by an increase in theft from vehicles. People were leaving their vehicles with their credit cards, and then the subjects were going out and doing the frauds. So by putting our resources where the theft from vehicles were occurring, we could actually impact the number of fraud cases that we were seeing. So it's really by going into the data and having a better idea of what the root causes are rather than addressing the frauds. So how do you address one of those? So we also shifted the role of the community police officer through the implementation of the community safety services strategy. Another aspect of the TOM that the SI contributed to included the adoption of the new service delivery models in various areas of the city, of the service. This included the implementation of the court's reorganization and shifting its service delivery model, which included the identification and implementation of process efficiencies, such as the implementation of new file management processes and optimizing our resource allocation. We adapted to the Crown's scope system, so they have their own record system, and we were able to adapt to it and be much more efficient, reduce duplication. And in the implementation of a lean subpoena process, which identified further process efficiencies and optimization, which has led to a more effective and efficient services provided by our courts unit. Changes to the Victim Crisis Unit with the move towards focusing on clinical professional service to victims and strengthening partnerships with OVS to provide non-clinical support to victims. So we're actually getting to our victims much quicker with the appropriate resources. And finally, the managed quadrant of the TOM, which includes introducing, investigating, developing, and implementing key strategies for the service, which includes a strategic review and white paper on civilianization and outsourcing of police services, which will align quite well with the Bill 175 that's coming soon. Leveraging that white paper to implement the civilianization of the front desk services, progress now, as well as the development of an operational performance management framework to ensure service as a whole are working towards shared and common goals and outcomes, and the implementation of the outsourcing of courthouse security. As you can see, SI worked on many aspects of the TOM. However, work remains to achieve the expected end state of those aspects. The adoption of a continuous improvement mindset will be required to continue with evolving and stabilizing these changes. Other areas within OP are doing work towards TOM as well. Dependencies to end state include current technology, the capabilities thereof, timelines of the IT modernization roadmap, facilities plan, the workforce and innovation project, and building required foundational elements to build, drive, and lead required strategies. The realization of the OPS time will take time. We're looking at a 5 to 10 year journey, and will include defining, developing aspects related to emerging trends and legislative changes that we know are coming. Many non-financial benefits have been realized based on the changes implemented under the project, which have been managed under SI. Reporting of the realization of these benefits will fall under the continuous improvement framework that the service plans to implement in the near future. To report on the financial aspects of the program, we've got a number of items that we're going to speak to. The total budget to administer the SI program from 2012 until 2018 totaled $6.2 million. On the other side of the ledger, we have realized a number of efficiencies. The financial savings realized to date total $1.1 million, which resulted from the court's reorganization that eliminated the need for an office move and compensation dollars related to downgrading within the restructuring exercise. It is important to note that the savings of $290,000 will be in perpetuity forever due to budget operating expenses and the ongoing savings of compensation dollars. Through the various reorganizations that were completed and the changes in certain business practices, the service has reinvested a total of 70 FTEs. This equates to approximately $7 million. This reinvestment is the delivery of new services and functions within the current budget envelope. Changes to many business practices through the demand management project will have the potential to realize the equivalent to an additional 73 FTEs, approximately 129,500 hours total, in which includes both civilian and sworn civilian capacity hours. These capacity hours will enable members to engage in more proactive police activities, develop and refine skills related to low-level investigations, and improve the overall level service to the public. These potential savings are dependent on a variety of factors. Most importantly, the need to reinforce the new way of doing business. Totaling the actual and potential redeployable savings amounts equal to $14.3 million annually. Excuse me. As many of you know, the SI program concluded in its official capacity April 30th of this year. Projects still in progress are now under the authority of the operational units. This includes the civilianization of the front desk, implementation of the alternative response unit, and the Guarding Mental Health Patients project. A full program evaluation will be conducted in the near future to assess the effectiveness of the SI program in meeting its stated objectives. This chief has committed to the value of the community consultation project, which is, the community consultation approach, which is our CAG. And actually, when we spoke earlier about our members being here, we also have our co-chair for our CAG, Chad, if you wouldn't mind, Chad Kikanowski, and our co-chair for the CAG, and has been really instrumental in keeping the momentum going. Thanks very much, Chad. Really instrumental in keeping the community engaged with the CAG as it moved forward. We have a number of other members, and I think some of them are actually going to speak on their 5 minutes. OPS is also committed to continuous improvement through the creation of a continuous improvement structure. This is predicated on an approved increase of 2019 budget. Further details related to the information contained in today's presentation can be obtained by reviewing the SI board report. Throughout the journey of the SI, we have seen tremendous change. We recognize change is hard for policing, but not changing is even harder. The impact of change to our members has not been lost on any of us, and I trust that our leadership teams will continue to work with our members to continue to improve the structures and processes that we've put in place. As was indicated, we have a number of SI members here, and I really did want to ensure that Jane was centered out. She was really instrumental in driving some of the changes that we've made, and I know that many of our superintendents took advantage of her being in the organization and were able to utilize her to build on their own knowledge and experience when it comes to change management, as well as the procurement process, which she's also an expert in. The members of the team are here, and they continue to be fully committed. Their passion and energy shows every single day, and it's all about improving organizational performance. They should be commended, as it's not been easy for them. I know that we've taken a few shots from the media, and that's the way it is. Change is hard, as I said, and we get that. But we also have 2+ more members internally who have been really integral to us being able to make the change to move forward. We have staff sergeants and sergeants now who are leading the way with their members, and they're providing recommendations on ways we can continue to make the change forward. Making change is one thing, but it's to actually go back and continue to look at what you've done and make sure that what you've done is going to work for the future. And then, subject to questions, that is it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deputy, and to your team. Really appreciate it. I know can't believe it. We started in 2011, so here we are 7 years later. We do have some questions from our board member, but we do have 3 members from the Community 3 delegation. I think we're going to go to that delegation first, and then we'll go to question from our board member. So I'd like to start with Miss Lucy Marlowe. Lucy, you're here. You can take your seat, and please, you have 5 minutes to address the board.
Hello, everyone. I wish I had more than 5 minutes because I would give probably a more view of my experience, so I apologize if it seems to be more one-sided than the other, and also forgive me, I'm very nervous. But thank you very much for the opportunity to provide my comments on my experience with the SI Implementation Community Advisory Group. Again, my name is Lucie Marlowe. I'm the founder of Crime Prevention Vanier and the Neighborhood Watch program volunteer coordinator in Vanier. See my button. I'm a proud resident of Vanier. My main motivation in participating in the CAG was to advocate for neighborhood policing. And please notice that I used the word neighborhood as opposed to community. As opposed to community policing, given that the Ottawa Police Services has a very broad definition of community, which includes health and hospital services and the LGBTQ and Islamic groups, CF and other interest groups, areas whose OPS needs differ from neighborhoods. Being a member of the CAG was quite an investment on my volunteer time. Dozens upon dozens of hours for sure. It's worth noting that the majority of the members of the CAG were paid staff. Those of us representing neighborhoods were volunteers. In retrospect, and should PS undertake a similar exercise in the future, I would strongly recommend that the consultations start earlier and be divided into like-minded groups that require similar services from OPS. I'm slightly ashamed to say that 90% of the content of a year and a half worth of meetings was way beyond my ability to comprehend, let alone share what I was hearing with my fellow crime fighters in Vanier. So 90% of the changes that came with Service Initiative, I can't comment on for better or for worse, because I don't understand a lot of it. But the remaining 10 that has to do with neighborhood policing, I do understand. A lesson learned that I'd suggest moving forward in the future is ensure that information provided is digestible and easily transferable to the broader community. Had someone asked me to summarize a meeting, I would not have been able to do so. I read the report very carefully, and I believe there is a false statement on page 5 where it says that the SII CAG members believe that their participation was instrumental. I think it's a bit presumptuous to state what members believe, and I do not recall being asked that question, so I challenge that assertion. As well, I do not recall feeling like CAG made significant contribution to selecting Overbrook and Lower Town to implement the first formalized community network, as indicated on page 6. As I stated, my main objective in participating was to look out for the interests of neighborhood policing, and to that end, there were some successes. The extension of tenure duration for our community police officers, and the transfer of knowledge between the departing CPO and his or her replacement, though this last gain is not mentioned in the closeout report, and the formalized community network. How much time do I have? I'll talk faster. Being a safety and crime prevention advocate in Vanier, I was particularly keen to be involved in the FCN, Formalized Community Network, but we were not consulted on what it would entail and how it would be implemented. I think I would have been a better a better contributor to its development and rollout plan than I was to the SI implementation. I have one uneasy feeling about the FCN. I find it somewhat disingenuous of the Ottawa Police to implement this project after the service initiative resulted in the elimination of our neighborhood officer positions and 5 of the 15 community police officer positions, which meant the expansion of the catchment area of the 10 community police officers. In the case of Vanier, our community police officer took on an additional 3 neighborhoods. It feels more like OPS is transferring some of the responsibility of neighborhood policing to the resident to do for themselves, though I have no doubt that Ottawa Police would view this as proactive policing. If you refer to the engagement and planning framework of the Formalized Community Network, it speaks of establishing neighborhood profiles, crime data, identifying stakeholders, engagement plans and responsibilities, terms of reference, and so on and so on. That is a lot for a community to commit to, and very procedural, which is not always a good fit to the more organic way neighborhoods implement community safety projects. To the best of my understanding, there is no funding or additional resources allocated to neighborhoods to effectively undertake such a project. I reiterate my concern that OPS is somehow trying to arm neighborhoods to do its own policing as a result of OPS's decision to reduce its support to neighborhood policing. Lastly, I would like to give credit to the Community Advisory Group process for connecting me with 2 other neighborhoods, meaning Hintonburg and Lower Town, when it might have been, while it might not have happened otherwise. I'm happy to consider sharing my comrades in arms, and for that I am grateful. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Lucy. Merci beaucoup. Any questions for the delegate? Okay, Member Smallwood.
I wanted to say thank you very much for coming. It was, I think you had some really interesting comments, and I hope you're going to share them, because I'm sure there's some points that we could certainly learn from what you've had to say. So thank you.
Thank you for saying so.
Thank you, Lucy. Our next presenter is Cheryl Perra. Good evening, Cheryl.
Thanks. So I'm Cheryl Parrott, and I'm from the Hintonburg Community Association, and I've been here before over the last 20 years or so. So the CAG was a long process, and I was one of the people that made it to almost every meeting. I must say it was a painful process, but I'm a nitpicker, and for me, I needed to find out how changes would be implemented. Because for me, I need to know how the structure works, how to make my entry in it, how to learn your language, because the police have very specific language, and if you don't know the right word, you're not really getting anywhere. So that's why I asked a lot of questions, and I found there was not enough time to ask the questions, especially in the beginning. There was so much information. You could ask one question, you were told to wait till the end of the meeting, and then the people all left. So it was a very dissatisfying process there. To have some continuing input on the procedures that you've created to improve them when they don't seem to be working for us. There's gaps right now. There's gaps in the reporting online. We still hear the rumors and people saying that they have been refused the ability to give a verbal report. And I've just learned through your presentation, when I looked at the report, about the demand for service, which we were hoping would fill some of the gap of the neighborhood officers, but I've now learned the right word for it. I spoke to Mark Ford last month and I didn't have the right word. Now I know the right word. Is that some of the requests that the community is asking to put into demand for service to have officers on patrol back up the community officer are being put into situational awareness is the new term. And if you look at the little diagram in your report, it says that that's for information only and no action is required. So that's why last year, when we were hoping to see something happen, it didn't happen because it was termed situational awareness, so nobody did anything about it. So that backup for our community police officer was not there. So we need to work with you on a continuing basis to figure this out. We've also had reports of people calling about a situation not at the immediate time it's happening, and again, no report will be taken. I've suggested to people do an online report only to find out you can't do an online report for that. So after 25 years of telling people report, 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 you come to our community meetings and say report, report, report. You've made it extremely difficult and to the point where I can't even tell people how to report. After 25 years of doing this, I'm confused. So you've totally bamboozled the public with some of these changes. You need to do a really good educational campaign on how to do this reporting and simplify it. And I would beg you, always take a report. One neighbor saw someone put out a bulletin about someone wanted for a homicide. She could not report immediately. She had her little kid with her. She had to get in the house. She had to do some things. She called. Because it was not immediate, no report was taken. But I would have thought you would have wanted to know what street that guy was on. Was it him? Maybe you'd already caught him, but her understanding was, who cares? You didn't do it right away, so too bad for you. I have a number of other things, but I guess what I would ask you is to work out a way, rather than us coming to Police Services Board and just complaining about little things, work out a way that we can try to make this work. You've made the changes, some of them we're not happy about, but the changes are there. So let's see if we can't figure out a way to do it. And I guess, you know, I'm frustrated enough with the process. I can't figure out your structure very well anymore, so I just pick a person, and they're the it person, and that's who I call, and right now, it's Mark Ford. So there you go, expect some calls, because I'm not willing to try to negotiate through the process. So I have lots of other things, but that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cheryl. Any question for Cheryl, Member Hoogley?
Just want to clarify, like, we obviously don't have enough Mark Fords out there, but we do have a lot of comments from the community about that the difficulty of reporting. So I'm just wondering, to respond to this presentation, does staff want to say something about what they're going to do with the reporting process? The education piece that you mentioned, and also to make sure that there's no gaps in how you can do a report?
We were hoping to keep the question till after, but since the House... Okay. Superintendent Ford, I think all the eyes toward you, so maybe you can answer that one.
I think what you're referencing will come out in the evaluation, specifically to the reporting challenges that Cheryl speaks to. But I think in the interim, there can be efforts, I think, to work with Cheryl and others just to address, any misunderstandings or or not misunderstandings, because that puts it on you, but any clarification on reporting and expectations from a community standpoint. So I think this will be an ongoing dialogue, but I think the longer term is to look towards the evaluation that will be completed.
Madam Deputy, you feel like you want to add something to this?
The online reporting is a process that we continues to evolve. Unfortunately, some of it we are learning as well. Some of it we are learning that somebody is facing one of the challenges that you've talked, because I know I've talked to you about some of them, and we are continuing to work on trying to simplify some of those to allow certain types of crimes to still be included. Suspicious persons and drugs were the most incident type that we received a lot of inquiries for. How can I put this information in? So we've tried to increase the types that are able to be brought in, and unless we know the specifics of the challenges that people are facing, we can't address it. So it's good that you have Superintendent to talk to, and I encourage anyone that has additional ways that we can improve. Right now it is Superintendent Ford, but we will continue to look at the way that we're doing business and try to improve those.
And Mr. Chair, I'll also ask, I understand as well, I get the fact that we need to continue educating the public. We partnered with Crime Prevention Ottawa and held a session just last month on how to make the right call, and received some very valuable feedback as far as the impact of that. So those are the types of things that we're going to look to build upon to make sure that we're in the community. And I agree with, take your point that we have to make it as easy as possible for the community to be able to report something, because that's what we want them. And sometimes it gets complicated, so trying to finesse the system so it is less complicated, straightforward.
Thank you, folks. And our final speaker, Mr. Terry Harris from Federation of Citizen Association. Mr. Harris, you have 5 minutes to address the board, please.
Oui, bonjour, mon nom est Thierry Harris. Je suis ici en tant que membre de la communauté habitant la Basse-Ville et représentant au CICAG pour l'Association des fédérations citoyennes d'Ottawa. Merci de nous accueillir aujourd'hui afin de vous offrir mes pensées au déroulement du groupe consultatif communautaire du service de police d'Ottawa. Je tiens à tenir mon discours dans les 2 langues officielles de notre capitale nationale. J'aimerais remercier tous les membres du service de police de la Ville d'Ottawa qui nous ont accueillis chaleureusement pendant des mois afin de travailler sur des dossiers en collaboration avec non seulement des membres du service, mais d'autres organisations de la communauté. Je pense que c'est important de les mentionner car ils ont tous, de leur manière, apporté un point de vue unique et des enjeux auxquels font face notre service de police ainsi que ceux de la communauté. L'apprentissage de manière horizontale et le réseau de confiance qui s'est formé entre les groupes communautaires autour de la table du CICAG est, à mon avis, aussi importante que l'apprentissage vertical ou top-down qui s'est fait du service de la police à la communauté. Je me suis personnellement fait des nouveaux amis qui sont ici avec moi aujourd'hui et dans quelques années, lorsque l'on regardera en arrière, on pourra se dire on s'est rencontrés, entourés par la police et nous ne nous sommes jamais sentis aussi en sécurité. Donc, merci. J'aimerais aussi souligner l'important travail de Jane Wright qui a participé à toutes les rencontres et qui a fait en sorte que nous nous sommes retrouvés les bons dossiers au bon moment pendant la durée du CICAG. Your professionalism was exemplary, and I think it's important to extend this to the entire police staff who worked on the CAG for its duration over the months. We had a lot of questions, always ready to answer them, so I thank you for that, and I'm certain so does the rest of the community organizations and individuals participating in the CAG. As a member of the Federation of Citizens Association of Ottawa, I joined the CICAG group in December of 2016. We had just completed a safety and security survey at the FCA and had the pleasure of welcoming Deputy Chief Jill Skinner to our meeting that day to let us know about the new SI and its impact on communities. At my first December 2016 CICAG meeting, we had a breakout session during In smaller groups, we tackled some of the communication challenges the police were having in reaching community associations. I found that first meeting to be the best one I had the pleasure of attending. And here's where I will go into what I believe are some of the challenges that the group should address moving forward. Please understand I am mentioning these from point of view of absolute respect for everyone involved in the process. I realize this was a first kick at the can. However, if the goal is to improve, then let me humbly offer you my remarks on exactly how the rollout of the CAG took place from my perspective. In terms of improvements, clearly there needs to be a distinguished operational and advisory capacity of the CAG. This wasn't made clear and much time was wasted with miscommunications on this front. If you give a community an operational say by appointing them to a decision-making board, it would go a long way towards inclusivity and providing accessibility to decision-making bodies that impact the quality of life of our communities. During the CAG meetings, if as much work was done summarizing the concerns and polling the community to identify pain points as was in explaining abstract bureaucratic concepts, we could have got twice as much work done, in my opinion. Simply understanding the power structures of who does what when to a head, such as, and I mean issues in the public, such as the sanctuary city issue that came up, or the opioid crisis, or the discussion around community police officers, being able to act on them in an operational capacity on the CAG would have been a much better use of people's time. We spend a lot of time understanding the big transition, and we're asked to sell this to communities, but the results and effectiveness of this pitch were extremely questionable. The CAG meetings were far from consistent depending on what needed to be discussed. We never really got a sense of moving the needle forward after the initial meetings, which I thought were tremendously well run in more of a workshop format. By having so different stakeholders around the table, we had a hard time identifying the roles and responsibilities of each. That role definition could have been made more clear up front and could have been underlined at the beginning of each meeting. Instead, we got a lot of death by PowerPoint, pardon the expression, and many us left the meeting scratching our heads as to what real direction we were going. In terms of next steps, what I would like to see, and what I believe many community groups would like to see, are concrete evaluation points on your measures of success for groups such as this moving forward. What are you doing to evaluate yourselves, and what are those measures of success? How do you transparently feed this back to the Police Services Board and to the community to build best practices and become a more effective group as a whole? To build trust with the community, you need to trust the community and encourage to engage with you on a higher level than what is being currently done. Just because this is a long-term perpetual goal does not mean that we cannot remind of it every day we go to work and stand in service of the community. In terms of another concrete suggestion, and quickly racking them up, I would suggest of improving things. The next time, I suggest that perhaps a primer course could be developed similar to what is done for planning issues on how the Police Services Board operates, or how the CAG operates, or the police service operates. This will allow more community members to participate in that process and then be able to work on a new CAG or a new form of consultation models if there is a plan to have one in the future. So those are my remarks, and I'll just leave you with this quote from Carl Schurz. He was a former American Civil War veteran who went on to become a prominent advocate for civil service reform with our neighbors down south. He said, "Ideals are like stars. We never reach them, but like the mariners of the sea, we chart our course by them." So thanks again for listening and for all the work that you do to the for the community. Merci.
Thank you very much, Mr. Harris, for your participation. And actually what I'm hearing is consistent from the three presenters, and one of our colleagues who sat with you on that committee who cannot be here today. She's planning and reaching out and having another meeting with you folks as a committee member, as a community member, and I hope you'll be able to participate and meet with Madame Valiquette her return. So we'll make some arrangement because she would like to meet with you folks and on the next step. So your work probably is not done yet, but hopefully we can continue working with you in the future. So with that, I turn it to member Hobley has a question.
Just a quick question, Mr. Get copies of these three presentations if it's possible, if that could be circulated to the board members.
So the deputy chief, I believe she will present them after to us. Any other question to the delegate before we turn the chair? Okay, thank you very much, Monsieur Tayan. Merci beaucoup.
Merci.
Okay, and now we go to a board question. I'm going to start with Natalie, and I'm going to ask the Vice Chair to continue.
I want to thank the Deputy Chief for her presentation. It's very clear that you're very passionate about this issue, and I know you put a lot of energy into this, Deputy, and so we appreciate your efforts on that. I also want to ask just two questions about it. One, you mentioned about break-ins or car break-ins and that. I just want you to explain this out a little better to me, because that seems to be the hot trend in the suburbs right now, is this, unlocking car doors, which I can tell you as a councillor, I'm very frustrated by it because it's a simple solution, lock your door. But for those that it happens to, it's still a theft when they're going in the car and stealing the GPS, or I can't imagine a day where I don't have my phone on me, but some people are getting their phones stolen out of cars and so on. And so I want to know that because, as you alluded to, this is a reporting after the fact. So is this going into what one of the presenters referred to as situation awareness, or are we actually tracking this? Because I think you can tell where the neighborhoods this is going on, and it's pretty regular. So go ahead if you want to address that, please.
Thanks very much. Well, the OPSAT is a process that allows us to do the crime trending that we're talking about. So the superintendents meet on a weekly basis with the two deputy chiefs, and the crime analysts provide the information on the crime trends that are occurring. Based on those crime trends, are made on prioritization of our resources. So, for instance, in the theft from vehicle, the fraud, bringing it back to the theft, then we would look at where are they happening. So if they're happening in the West Division, the superintendent from Frontline or the superintendent from Community Relations would determine who is the best person to lead a response. Then they would assign resources based on the complexity of the problem. For something like the theft from vehicles, often flooding an area with officers, increasing the community's watch over the area that's being impacted. There are many crime prevention activities that can take place. A whole plan is put in place, an operational plan. It can be down to the sergeant level who is creating this plan, so it doesn't have to be something big and robust. It can just be, I have X number of officers today, I need to take 3 or 4 of them and put them on this problem so that we address it. So it's really just about looking at what the situation is and then assigning it to somebody to report, to develop a plan, and then a report back. And that report back then comes back to the OPSAT so that it's that feedback loop so that we can see that that kind of activity, theft from vehicles, the solutions that we put in place actually have an impact, and then the next time a theft from vehicle situation occurs, we can use the same problem solving that we used in that situation, or we can adapt it based on a different community. Does that make sense?
Okay, so based on what you're saying, I can look forward to some arrests this summer.
If people are reporting them, that's one of the challenges is people don't report. They leave their vehicles open, they know that change is taken, they know that things are happening, and they just put it off to kids in the area. And it is a crime of opportunity.
And I think we can both agree that for whatever reason that they're not reporting, they're reporting it on social media. And that's a little troubling because they're putting pictures of kids and that on social, and from my perspective, that worries me, but I would like to know that we're going to get a hold of this issue, and it's not 100 kids, it's a handful of kids that are doing this, and from what we're seeing in the pictures, it is kids. So if we could get a handle on it by the force this year, I'd appreciate it. I also want to mention to your presentation, one of the things I know myself and others, when we first heard of SI and saw the early plans of where you were going with this, there was a real focus on the impact to the community police officer program. program because the communities love their CPOs, and they are so effective in bridging the gap between the community and the Ottawa Police Force. But your presentation today and in talks I've had with you on this issue, you're really showing that it's a lot more than just the changes to the CPO program. There's been a lot of good work done under this initiative, and I want to commend you for that. I'm going to ask you one more question. Page 14, you talk about a report on outsourcing and ways to do things better. I don't recall seeing that report. Is it something we're going to get a hold of?
It didn't come to the board. It was basically a white paper to inform decision makers within the police service that here's the opportunities that are available for outsourcing. I think the organization took a decision at the point that this wasn't a road we were going down at this time, so we held off on doing any further activities with it. I think Bill 175 actually gives us an impetus to resurrect the paper and make sure that our decision makers that are remaining have this knowledge and are prepared to utilize it as necessary.
I believe I have an inquiry out with the board, I remember asking the question last fall about options available for new revenue lines or outsourcing. So I'm wondering if as part of that we could get some of that information. Even though you're not ready to implement now, I think it would be helpful for the board and their decision making, especially around budget time and stuff, to have a sense of what you're looking at and why maybe that one didn't work, but what else could be looked at. So Chief, if you could just take that as a takeaway, we can talk more about it at the, between meetings. Okay, thank you. Thank you again, Deputy. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Member Hubley and Member Blaustein.
Thank you very much for the presentation. In the interest of time, I'm going to try and keep it shorter, my questions. Two questions mostly. What progress evaluation standards are going to be in place going forward on this program? And what are the top items you would do differently to ensure community engagement with all of the stakeholders, as well as consultation being optimized to community members who participated in the meetings?
Can you repeat that second question, please?
So don't do one question at a time. That would be okay.
That would be helpful. Thank you.
So the first question being, what progress evaluation standards are going to be in place going forward?
So the Continuous Improvement Office, the PPNA office, that is the plan for the future. That is something that will have to be budgeted into the 2019 budget. But that is something that is planned by the organization to conduct an assessment evaluation of the changes that have taken place. And that is the plan.
Okay, so the second question is, having heard some community members and various other remarks from various people, I'm sure over the last many months, what are the top items you do differently moving forward to ensure communication and engagement is optimized with community members and the other stakeholders?
So, as a matter of fact, we did survey the members of CAG, and we did get that feedback that Mrs. Perro spoke about, Cheryl Perro spoke about, that people were pleased with the participation. I think the changes that I know that I would make if I was involved in something like that, certainly I think the community advisory group is essential. We didn't put it in place early on in the process. And I think the roles and responsibilities of the CAG has to be completely understood by everyone who's there. I think we tried to be all things to all people by having many different representations, whether that was diverse ethnic groups, whether it was community associations, BIAs, businesses. And we know from internally we have to have separate groups, separate audiences, so that because there's different messages that you have to distribute and get information back from. So I think my second recommendation would be that you identify like groups and bring them together. The challenge for us, and I know that some of the meetings were death by PowerPoint, but until someone understands what policing is about and what the structure actually looks like. People's belief of what policing is often based on what they see on television, and there's nothing like that. So we really have to give them some information so that they have that overall picture of what the organization looks like. I think we tried to give them everything, and we should have been much more focused on, okay, online reporting is one of the things that we're going to discuss. Let's talk about the process, give you a step-by-step on how this works, the types of crimes, etc., and then focus on that. And I think we came together as an SI group and identified those quite quickly. We tried to back off, but by then it was too late, and many of our changes from an SI perspective were structural. So the process pieces are things that have developed, we've moved on, and they will continue to develop. I think the online reporting is a great example of something that we've expanded the use of online reporting, but there's a lot more ability and a lot more communication and awareness that needs to be out in the community that it is a viable option, and it isn't just give the information and we shut it down. We have data for distributing and determining our resources as they're assigned.
Thank you, Madam Thompson. Mr. Small.
Thank you. I received some positive feedback from a business owner in relation to the new frontline deployment model in terms of both increased visibility and patrolling in the byward market. The one concern that he raised was the rotation of officers patrolling under the new model. He mentioned that it makes it difficult for the officers to better understand the area and build relationships and trust with those who live and work there. I'm wondering if you can explain how the new frontline deployment model allows for officers to still build relationships and familiarity in certain parts of the community while still having the rotating resources as opposed to dedicated.
So for starters, we still have a community police officer that works in Centertown, the Byward Market. We also still have people that are working the bikes and beats. Although it has not become a formalized entity until next year, we've put people on bikes and beats since the implementation. So the difference is we call it a service delivery method rather than a unit, because it's really about generalization. So instead of driving a car, you're walking on your own 2 feet. So it's really about how we deliver that service. And when it comes to knowing a certain area and officers being rotated, the members of the front line who are working in Lower Town, for instance, are working in Lower Town the time that they're in patrol. So having worked in patrol myself, you work in, say, Byward Market is my zone, well, that's the zone I will continue to work in. And it may not be Monday to Friday, but it's all the shifts that I work, I will be in that area. So you do have a level of knowledge. The challenge that I know is that exists today is not having that point of contact, and I think there's good and bad to that, right? So the fact that someone from the BIA can call Sergeant Johnny and get Sergeant Johnny to respond to an issue is great for the member of the BIA and Sergeant Johnny, but from an organization's perspective, we need to prioritize our resources, and it can't just be based on relationship. We have to look at the prioritization of the call for service and not give one entity a higher level of service than another if the prioritization of that work meet the criteria. So, are people working in the same area? Yes, they are. Do we have people working in the beats? Yes, we do. Will that improve over the next year? Yes, it will. We're going to increase those numbers. We had to wait until the annual leave draw after May of this year, so you'll see an additional number of people who are assigned full-time to the Bikes and Beats squad, and they will be there for whatever the tenure of that position is.
Thank you very much, folks. So I did receive a couple of questions/comments from Member Velikat. As you know, Member Velikat was the board appointed to work with the SI team and the community. So on behalf of Madame Velikat, I want to say thank you to the community member and also to the SI team for their hard work on this one. I spent a night with Inspector Robert Rob Dunlop, and we talk a lot about SI, and he summarized it so nicely. What did I say? Drummond. I said Dunlop. Dunlop got the credit even when he's not here.
Jamie and Rob look alike.
I think I need a moment, yes. Why don't I call him Robert, as I always call him? Thank you, sir. Yes. So he explained it properly, and I think the most effective way to some of the members. He said, before he joined the SI, he was a critic of the SI. Soon as he joined the team and he worked with the team and he started to try to take it one piece at a time, he said that was one of the most effective way to understand it. One of the challenge was sometimes was too much information. People were drinking out of the fire hose. And that was a challenge. Sometimes it's not easy for folks to, and changes always have a negative spin before anything else. I don't like spin. And I said it to you before, police officers hate two things equally, the status quo and the change. So you can just imagine the challenge with the SI. But nevertheless, we start to see a good result, and I hope the future will show our investment in the SI. But one of the questions Suzanne has asked specifically, how we're going to manage or how we're going to monitor the saving in the future. That's one question. And second, how could we keep the community member engaged working with us to keep them engaged with this? So I'm not sure if you, Deputy, going to answer this or the Chief, but I'm looking at you for now, so we'll start with you.
I think we've had enough discussions about this that I think the exact is all under the understanding that this is something that we're going to have to continuously monitor and evaluate and continue to make changes. The things that we put may not be the final result. You can develop any model you want. Until you put people into it, you don't know how it's going to react. And then you add on the community, and that's a whole other entity. So now you have a whole lot of people trying to understand the way the processes work, and they have changed. But in my view, they have changed for the better. I know that there's some areas that can still use improvement. And when you say, what are we going to do to continue that? Well, we have a cadre of superintendents and inspectors and staff sergeants who are here as leaders of this organization, and the impetus of the requirement is on them to continue to monitor and make changes for positive. I know we talked about it today at lunch. It really is about being focused on the good of the organization and not focused on the good for me. And if we can encourage that type of thinking, we will make change that is positive for the city and our community and our police service. Our members are going to be happier when they're completely engaged in their work and they have something that they can focus their efforts on. Because they came here for a reason. They came here because they wanted to help, and we have to invigorate that with strong communication all the way through the chain of command.
Well, thank you very much. Any other question from our colleague? Well, Deputy Chief, first of all, congratulations on and thank you for completing the project for before your retirement, and hopefully our member Valiket, when she comes back on her return, she can reach out to the community member, and we keep those folks with an engagement at some way, and we can work with the superintendent in charge, and we'll move forward on this. With that, I want to thank you on behalf of the board, and maybe I'm going to get up and shake your hand and give you a hug, if I may, because this file has been here for such a long time, and I want to thank you for this, Joe. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think the one thing that I would add is I continue to be a member of the community here, and if you think that these people are going to be hard on the organization, wait till I'm on the outside looking in.
And special thanks to the SI team as well. So thank you very much, folks. And Rob Drummond, thank you, sir. You and your team. Krista confused me with your name. With that, I believe is our So what's on the front of us, the item 11, that the Ottawa Police Service Board received this report for information. On the report, received? Received. Now I need a motion to move in camera because this public portion of our meeting is finished. So move. And we don't have to ask A's and A's on it. Huh? We're all in agreement? Okay. Thank you.